Today is Monday, November the 16th. This morning in Los Angeles and this morning in America. I am your host, Casey Phoenix, and this is my morning political thought. Now, for the morning political thought today, I will do my best to keep it short because actually I'm cramped for time here. But there was one side news story that I want to read first. It's an article that I'm very, 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 very happy about. So it's a side news story from the morning political thought. And I want to read this and then I'll go into my morning political thought, which of course is about the election and evidence and things like that. But this side news story that I came across this morning in the Washington Times is about the wars. And I'm super duper excited. As soon as I had seen it, I said, yes, that's what I want to talk about. But before I go into that, thepurpleelephantshow.com, main podcasting platform, The Purple Elephant Show on Instagram, on Parler, the free speech platform. And if you're watching this on BitChute or Daily Motion, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. YouTube, I guess you could hit the subscribe button. I'm still in the process of seeing where I want to go on things when it comes to the platforms that the show will be carried on. And I mentioned this before during my announcement. I'm doing an overhaul. I've already phased out Facebook. I put up a message over the weekend, like I said I would, saying that I will no longer post anything related to the Purple Elephant Show on Facebook. So Facebook is a done deal. I'll still let the page stay up and it'll still be there, and everything that's been posted there will stay there. But any future stuff is not going to be up on Facebook anymore. But as for YouTube, I'm 65 to 70% sure I will probably phase out YouTube as well. I'm still researching Rumble is what I'm doing. And then of course, also I have BitChute, which BitChute, so far I love BitChute. The only negative about BitChute is that the videos don't upload right away. If the videos uploaded right away, then I would so phase out YouTube and just be done with it. But like I said before, I'm looking at Rumble. I'll check there. Anyways, you know that part. Let me get to this because I got things to do and I'm babbling right now. So, all right. The title of the article, New Defense Secretary Signals End to Middle East Wars. And this is by Ben Wolfgang of the Washington Times. He says the United States must end the era of perpetual war and bring its troops back home. Acting Defense Secretary Christopher C. Miller wrote in a weekend message to the Pentagon, laying the groundwork for major withdrawals from Afghanistan and elsewhere during the final weeks of the Trump administration. First of all, we're not in the final weeks of the Trump administration, which I'll be talking about that during my morning political thought. Nobody knows if we're in the final weeks of President Trump's administration. So, whoever wrote this, they could have kept that to themselves, but I digress. Mr. Miller, a military veteran and counterterrorism official who was tapped for his new post after the abrupt firing of Mark Esper last week, made crystal clear that he shares President Trump's view that endless wars abroad are not in America's interest. His comments strongly suggest the administration will mount a fierce push to bring all U.S. forces home from Afghanistan before presumptive, I'm not even going to call that man's name. I'm skipping to the next paragraph. Mr. Miller also could preside over future troop drawdowns in Iraq, Syria, and in Africa if President Trump presses the issue with military leadership. The acting secretary stressed that the U.S. must continue its fight against al-Qaeda and other extremist groups, but he also argued that it's time for America's role to change. As we prepare for the future, we remain committed to finishing the war that al-Qaeda brought to our shores in 2001. The war isn't over, Mr. Miller said, or Mr. Miller wrote. We are on the verge of defeating al-Qaeda and its associates, but we must avoid our past strategic error of failing to see the fight through to the finish. Indeed, the fight has been long, our sacrifices have been enormous, and many are weary of war. I'm one of them. But this is the critical phase in which we transition our efforts from a leadership to a supporting role. We are not people of perpetual war. It is the antithesis of everything of which we stand and for which our ancestors fought, he wrote. All wars must end. Ending wars requires compromise and partnership. We met the challenge, we gave it our all, now it's time to come home. Mr. Miller did not explicitly mention Afghanistan, but it's clear that it is the administration's top priority in terms of troop withdrawals. The administration's peace deal with the Taliban struck last February calls for an end to America's military presence in exchange for guarantees Afghanistan will never again become a safe haven for Al Qaeda and other terrorist groups. The U.S. had about 12,000 troops in the country when the deal was signed. The number is now around 4,500. Administration officials have said it will be down to 2,500 by early year. But President Trump has declared that he wants all forces home by Christmas, far earlier than the mid-2021 deadline for withdrawal laid out in the U.S. Taliban deal. Mr. Miller may try to meet the president's ambitious timeline despite skepticism from some military leaders who favor a more cautious, conditions-based approach. There are also major questions about whether the time frame is logistically feasible. It's no secret that President Trump's broader effort to bring U.S. troops home has led to friction with military leaders. In late 2018, for example, the then Defense Secretary James Mattis resigned in protest over President Trump's decision to pull most troops from Syria. On Afghanistan, critics say it would be a serious mistake for the president to install Mr. Miller and other newly minted Pentagon officials just to facilitate a quicker exit. If it's got something to do with Afghanistan, the president needs to recognize that battlefield reality doesn't often comport with a political calendar. Former Homeland Security Secretary Jay Johnson told ABC's This Week on Sunday, if he wants troops out of Afghanistan, as I know most Americans do, we have to do it in a way that makes sense, in an orderly manner, and that comports with battlefield reality. The president did not give a reason for dismissing Esper, though the two men have publicly clashed on issues and their relationship has soured over the past several months. I'm reading from a distance here. Meanwhile, Pentagon officials warned recently that continued Taliban attacks across the country could undermine the U.S. Taliban peace agreement. American forces in recent weeks have ramped up airstrikes on Taliban targets in support of Afghan security forces. While President Trump has succeeded in reducing the number of troops in war zones such as Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria, critics point out that he's actually sent more servicemen and women to the Middle East than he has brought home. The Pentagon, over the past 2 years, has dispatched thousands of troops to U.S. military bases in the region because of tensions with Iran. The Pentagon does not release exact troop figures, but the number of new deployments and redeployments looks to be greater than the forces President Trump has brought home. Okay, so I'm excited with this that President Trump wants to end it. He's mentioned it before. He's already fired former Secretary of Defense Mark Esper. Of course, everybody knows he fired Mad Dog Mattis because Mad Dog Mattis wasn't doing the job in regards to getting rid of ISIS. Obviously, it was being drugged out because if it's drugged out, then that means there is a reason for us to stay in the Middle East longer. And President Trump's like, no, let's get out of the Middle East. But with this particular new acting Secretary of Defense, because that's what this person is an acting Secretary of Defense, they haven't been confirmed by the Senate. At least this person is on the same page as President Trump saying, okay, let's get the troops out because we've been in the Middle East for a long time now. And they're saying that in this article, President Trump has sent troops to the Middle East because of Iran. That's understandable because we know Iran was, I don't believe it is now because there's been sanctions on Iran and other things it was the number one sponsor of terror across the Middle East. And that obviously has changed. Even President Trump himself has said that. But I'm at least happy that they've started the process where they're attempting to pull troops out of Afghanistan and other places. As for sending troops there, obviously, we want to be ready if something were to happen as related to Iran. So I totally get that. But the time is going to have to come where these Middle East countries will have to defend themselves. And we sell them enough weapons, just like we sell weapons. It was either to the UAE or Bahrain. We sold some F-35s and some other weapons. It was like $1 billion deal. We sold billions of dollars of weapons to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia and Iran do not get along. So we sell them enough weapons. They need to step up and be able to defend themselves. And if they have an issue with each other, they need to handle the issue and fight it out there. That's how I feel on that. Now, when it comes to the morning political thought, in regards to the evidence, I am really, really curious. And I have to take a sip of water right quick. So, excuse me. All right. I'm really, really curious. Because Sidney Powell, and that was the other thing. This is the thing. It's got real. As the old saying goes, it's about to get real. It's got real. President Trump's legal defense team is switched up because for some people who don't know, some other attorneys had quit because they were being harassed, either by a client saying, hey, why are you representing the president in attempting to overturn the election or doing this and whatever. And then the law firms just backed out because they were being harassed by people. Or other law firms internally, there was dissension internally within the law firms. So that was another thing too. Well, now President Trump has Sidney Powell. Of course, he has Rudy Giuliani, which that's a good thing. He needs somebody he can trust. And President Trump has known Rudy Giuliani for decades. But also, he's brought on Victoria Tensing and Joe DeGeneva. For those of you who are not familiar, Victoria Tensing and Joe DeGeneva are top-notch lawyers. They've worked in the government. They're former AGs. And also, they've been on like Lou Dobbs all the time and other shows too. They've been on Sebastian Gorka's show as well. And there's another show they used to go on a lot too, not just Lou Dobbs, but they were on Lou Dobbs the most. And they're on top of they're hardcore. They're not shrinking violence. They don't back down. They're tough. But the thing is that Sidney Powell on Maria Bartiromo on Sunday Morning Futures has said, yeah, we're ready to present evidence that will overturn the election. And usually, attorneys are cautious people. They don't say things that they can't really back up per se in court. Where if they say something, they're more than likely going to bring the receipts. And Sidney Powell was saying that so much evidence is coming in. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose or something to that effect. So I think if Sidney Powell said it, this has to be something really serious. Like really, they talked about the software and everything else, but I feel like there's other things involved. I really do. And the crazy thing about this is that, and like I said, I'm nowhere near the break glass in case of emergency point. This type of case is something that the DOJ usually deals with. And it takes, when the DOJ is putting together a case, or the feds, it usually takes a year or 2 years. Now, this is a heavy lift. It's a very heavy lift because as the DOJ, when they deal with stuff like this, it will they'll usually wait a year or two to make sure everything is together, to make sure the I's are dotted, the T's are crossed, and everything is on the up and up. And they're having to pretty much do a 2-year case in 2 weeks, is what we're looking at here. They have to do what really the DOJ usually does. So this is becoming more and more interesting by the day. And I'm ready to see this evidence. I really am. Everybody already knows that there's been talk about the voting system, about the ballots and things like that. But the way Sidney Powell was talking on Sunday Morning Futures is like there's something else. And when Maria was asking her, well, how do you plan to present it? And Sidney said, well, I can't, telegraph that for the world to know. But she was saying that there is evidence. Also, she mentioned payoffs as well. People taking payoffs to use the Dominion voting system and other things. So I'm ready to see this evidence. I really, really am. And with Joe DeGeneva and Victoria Tensing on the team, with Rudy Giuliani and Sidney Powell, this is wild territory, is what this is. This is wild territory. So I'm ready to see the evidence. I really, really am. And like I said, this is going to be a heavy lift, because this is the type of case where you need a year or two to build the case. They're building the case within a few weeks. And nothing, as I mentioned before, nothing is really that serious yet, because stuff doesn't start happening until December. We're still in the middle of November. Today's November 16th. So we're still in the middle of November. So when we hit December, if nothing's been filed and all this other stuff, or it's not working its way through the courts, or it has worked its way through the courts and things are getting shot down and so on and so forth, then I might give the side eye a little bit. But for the most part, and another thing President Trump mentioned is that a lot of the lawsuits that have been filed, and some have been shot down, those have not been the ones filed by the Trump campaign. Those have been the ones filed by other citizens. And other citizens have been doing their own research. They've been cross-checking and cross-referencing people who voted or who were said to have voted, absentee ballot and things like that. They're calling people, confirming. There was someone on Laura Ingraham, if I'm not mistaken, who is said to have voted in either Nevada or Arizona, but he's in Tennessee or some other state on the East Coast. And he said that he didn't vote, but in the other state is saying that he did vote. So, and that's just one example. Obviously, we have examples of dead people voting and so on and so forth. So there's affidavits, there's other things, irregularities, I call it fraud, that have happened. The question is can you get this in a court, and can you prove your case that there was enough tampering with the votes to overturn an actual election? The route that they're planning on taking, to my understanding with President Trump, is under the 14th Amendment, saying that votes were not treated equally, like in the state of Pennsylvania, where in Democrat districts, people could cure their ballots, where if there was something wrong with it, that they would be contacted within a certain county, mostly Democrat counties, to say, hey, you filled out your ballot, but you did this part wrong. What we need for you to do is to make the correction so we can go ahead and make sure your vote counts. But in Republican districts, they were not afforded those same opportunities. So under the 14th Amendment, everyone has to have the right to vote, and everyone has to be treated equal when it comes to voting. Because people were not treated equally in Pennsylvania, the votes it should be overturned on that reason alone, based off of the 14th Amendment. And certain votes should be thrown out, in addition to other things with votes where ballots just come in the middle of the night and so on and so forth. Poll watchers not being able to watch ballots that came in the middle of the night as they were counted, and the list goes on and on and on and on. But as for this evidence, because that stuff I just mentioned about Pennsylvania, I don't feel that's the thing that Sidney Powell was talking about. I feel it's something else. She's saying that, yeah, we're ready to present the evidence to overturn the election. Like, she just said it as a matter of fact. And the way she said it as a matter of fact is like, okay, wow, let's see the evidence then. Even though we've obviously had other evidence of fraud, but I don't believe the other stuff that we've seen with Kayleigh McEnany doing her presentation with the affidavits and other things. I don't believe what they're talking about is related to the other stuff that we've seen thus far. So I'm ready to see the evidence. I'm so ready to see the evidence so I can be like, wow. And that's my morning political thought. I have to go. There's other things going on, and I have to get going. Thank you to everyone for your support. I really appreciate it. If you are watching this, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to like. Don't forget to share. Sharing is caring. In this day and age, sharing is daring. So be daring and share the content. It helps me out. Until next time, thepurpleelephantshow.com, main podcasting platform. Be blessed.